This is StoriesRoc. We feature stories about real people told on a common subject in front of a live audience. So welcome to this event. Our first reader is Jenny Lloyd. She grew up in England, lived in Italy and Mexico before she came to Rochester in 1980. She's a retired history professor, and she says she's also a recovering academic writer. She is the author of Catching Meggie the Runaway Shetland Sheepdog, and also a memoir, a wonderful memoir, called In My Mind's Eye, A Cornish Girlhood. And she will also have her books for sale after the show. She now teaches classes at Oasis, an organization for people like me, over 50. And in the spring, she's going to be offering a class to explain to women how we got the vote 100 years ago. And if you were participating in or saw the honoring of Susan B. Anthony's tombstone on Tuesday, it was a real celebration. People were putting their I voted sticker on there, and flowers and all kinds of things. So it was really something to celebrate. A little known fact about Jenny. She used to enjoy driving at more than 100 miles an hour on the Autostrada in Italy. And tonight she will read For Want of a Transcript.
We put our stickers on. Took us 2 hours. I sat in front of the University of Rochester's, this is called For Want of a Transcript. I sat in front of the University of Rochester's admission officer's desk. His rooms, it seemed very new to me, once used to meeting with British university officials in much older surroundings. He was shuffling the few papers I had managed to get together for my credentials. The certificates for my British BA, MA and Postgraduate Certificate of Education, called PGCE, 1 piece of paper for each. My recent results of the GRE and SAT, which I took alongside some of my students in Mexico the previous spring. I took the GRE before the SAT. The British A-level math exam results from that summer, also taken with some of my economics students at Gringate School. "Where's your transcript from Cambridge?" asked the admissions officer. I didn't know what he was talking about. "That's all I have." "What? How am I to know what courses you took and your grades?" "I only took history courses." "For 3 years? For all 3 years?" "Yes, and I didn't get grades." I hadn't understood that this would be a problem. I thought the fact that I'd been to Cambridge, Britain's premier university, was enough. After all, only one in the 400 women who took the entrance exams each year were admitted. But the admissions officer obviously didn't know that, and I didn't have what he needed. Following my husband to a new country, I had no green card yet, and after 5 consecutive years of teaching in Italy and Mexico, I couldn't look for work. I decided to make the best of it. In Italy, I had enjoyed teaching maths to middle schoolers, and in Mexico, I had taken the school's math classes while teaching history. I would turn myself into a math teacher. In my British mind, I still call it maths. I thought it would be easier to find a math job, and I was tired of grading history essays. After 2 months in the United States, my naivete was immense. I had no clue that there would be many choices as to where to take classes. I'd heard of the University of Rochester from Cecil Rowntree, Rochester resident and former CEO of French's, my husband's company. Cecil had visited us in Italy and encouraged me to go to the U of R. So here I was in the admissions office. "You want to get an undergraduate degree in math?" asked the admissions officer. "But where's your general education? It will take you several years to get all the credit you need." "I can't just take math classes." "Well, As you already have an undergraduate degree, if you went as a graduate student to get an MA in math, you could. In Mexico, I'd taken the equivalent of 2 years of undergraduate work, hardly enough preparation for graduate study. But that seemed to me to be the only alternative, so that's what I did. I had to audit several classes that were prerequisites to the ones I needed to take for the degree. I did okay taking 3 classes for the first semester, but in the spring I had to take a required class called Functions of a Real Variable. Taught by an aged professor who wore the same suit for the entire semester with increasingly large holes in the pants. The class consisted in the professor writing theorems on the board, which we dutifully copied. Homework was 10 proofs, graded by a graduate student we never met, and with no comments and no going over in class. Many students dropped the class, leaving a bunch of geniuses on the left side of the room who delighted in pointing out any mistakes the professors made, while the 5 of us on the right, desperately trying to hang on, were still trying to work out what he might have meant. There were 3 exams, all proofs, and we had to memorize all the theorems, which at age 42 I found impossible. Until then, I'd never failed an exam in my life. But in the second exam, on my birthday, I got a 0. Still, I laboured over the homework for hours and generally got about 7 out of 10 right. Homework counted for the grade, so I managed to scrape past with a D. I never understood what a real variable is. I signed up for 3 more classes the following fall. When I went to the first sessions, I found that homework didn't count in any of them. I knew I couldn't pass the exams. I needed far more time than the hour allotted. I dropped all the classes and sold back the books. I was aimless and drifting. But I now had a green card. I could at least teach history, or so I thought. After all, I had been a recognised certified teacher in Britain. Surely that counted for something. I started the process to get New York State Teachers Certification. Of course, they wanted transcripts. I met with someone from the certification office. Instead of the transcripts, they wanted a letter from Cambridge University confirming that I had no grades. Syllabi from the British Advanced Level exams in History, English Literature and Latin that I'd taken in 1956. This was 1982. And the syllabus for the A-level math exam I'd taken in 1980. They also wanted certificates for my BA, MA and PGCE, those I had. I wrote to the relevant British authorities and eventually got at least some of the material they wanted, including a letter that said Cambridge University by statute does not issue grades. It made people who saw it laugh. The state bureaucracy took its time, as bureaucracies always do. I lived in Italy and had an ample experience. But eventually I got my certification in history. But it was only temporary. They wanted another master's degree within 5 years. Now I have to admit, I did nothing for my Cambridge MA. They gave it to us with no extra year work 5 years after we graduated. There was a reason. We did nothing but our subject for 3 years. Other British universities, except Oxford, required a subsidiary subject. Our work was regarded as equivalent to an MA elsewhere. Since I spent my last year reading chronicles of medieval philosophy in Latin, I think that was reasonable. I probably should have gone to Albany and argued that my PGCE, that's a postgraduate certificate in education, was equivalent to an MA. But by then I had a job as a teacher of the gifted at Lloyd and didn't have the time. Instead, I meekly enrolled in the education MA at Brockport, thinking that since my job was K through 12 and a lot of my work was with elementary students, I would get elementary certification. I immediately found that my PGCE was indeed the equivalent to the education MA, and I would be taking basically the same courses, except for 2 courses in reading, which I did enroll for. I'd not found education courses fascinating 20 years before, and I didn't now. I couldn't stand to repeat them. At the end of the semester, I wandered over to the history department. I knocked on the door of Bruce Leslie, the departmental graduate director, and had what was probably the most important conversation of my life. "What do I have to do to enroll for the History MA?" I asked. "I'm British and I don't have a transcript," I quickly added. "Not to worry," said Bruce, smiling. "I spent time at Brunel University in London and I understand British qualifications," and that's the person I'd ever met who did. "Where did you go to university?" "Cambridge." Bruce looked impressed and took a quick glance at my GREs, which I had handed to him. "I don't think there'll be any problem admitting you. Just fill in the application form. I'll look forward to seeing you in the fall." So I returned to the study of the past after 25 years and was delighted to discover that women had acquired a history while I wasn't looking. At Cambridge, the only women mentioned were a few queens. I loved every minute of my ME studies, even although they entailed a 100-mile round trip from Rochester to Honeyoy to Brockport and home again twice a week. As I approached graduation, and the prospect of an unassailably genuine transcript, I found it hard to abandon my newly awakened fascination with history. By then, my husband and I were amicably divorced. He had moved to Chicago, and I was living with my partner Connie. I told her about my dilemma. "Why don't you apply to a PhD program?" she asked. "You would need to get some funding, but I'll pay the house and grocery expenses if you go food shopping, walk the dog, and take Mum and Dad, who lived in the apartment below, to stores and their doctor's appointments." It was an amazing proposal. I would never dare think of it on my own. I only applied to the University of Rochester. I was 48, and I thought I had no chance. But my Brockport grades spoke for me. They admitted me, funded me, and gave me the best 4 years of my life up to then. During my first year, I wrote to my former supervisor at Cambridge that she would be surprised to hear I was in a PhD program. "Oh no," she wrote back, "I always thought you could do that." She might have mentioned it at the time. I had no idea. Once I graduated, I found that there aren't many jobs for history PhDs, especially in British women's history, my field, and especially for an older woman who wasn't willing to move from Rochester. I was essentially unemployable. However, Brockport knew me and hired me back as an adjunct and eventually as Director of Women's Studies. I had a career. My struggles with functions of real variable and the State Certification Office had unwittingly helped me to find myself in America.
And aren't we glad she did? Oh, so much lost in translation. Thank you, Jenny. And you will find the same witty writing in her memoir.